This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
There has been a lot of talk in the Cleveland Browns sphere of replicating the success that they had, offensively at least, in 2025, well, in 2021, in 2020, in 2025. My question is this: do the Browns have the horses to be able to successfully go back to what they did in 2021 and 2020? I don't know why I'm saying it backwards, but this is how it's coming out of my brain. But in those two seasons, do they have the same horses? Because we're talking about a team that was in a vastly different place at the quarterback position. We're talking about a team that was in a vastly different place at the running back position, on the offensive line, than where this team is. So how does this 2025 team stack up? What's worse about this version of the Browns offense? What's better about this version of the Browns offense? And how much does the Browns defense being good compensate for all of that? And the answer to that question, spoiler warning, might be the defense can compensate for a lot. But let's start with quarterback play, which is the huge elephant in the room, right? Whenever the Browns talk about we want to go back to what we did in 2020, in 2021, well, you know, Baker Mayfield's now a multiple-time Pro Bowler. He was the quarterback of your team. Now you don't have that guy, right? So how do you replicate that level of success? Now, the version of Baker Mayfield that the Cleveland Browns are replacing isn't the multiple Pro Bowl version of Baker Mayfield. They are simply replacing a quarterback who was 20th in success rate in that time period from 2020 to 2021. Of all quarterbacks who had over like 390 snaps, he was about 20th of those quarterbacks, you know, which is similar to where Joe Flacco ranked last year in terms of success rate. EPA per play, he was also at 20. If we look at the Browns as a team in 2020 to 2021, they were 16th ranked in drop back success rate. They were 14th in drop back EPA per play. So can the Browns replicate that level of passing success? My answer to this question is kind of nuanced here. Will the Browns be able to replicate that level of play over a 17-game period? It's unlikely. It's unlikely. Can they get 6 to 8 weeks of that level of play? I think that's possible. I think Joe Flacco could give you, at best, 6 to 8 weeks of close to average quarterback play. That's what he gave the Browns in 2023. That's what he gave the Colts last year in 2024. And that would be a nice way for the season to jumpstart for the Cleveland Browns, is if Joe Flacco can play the first couple of legs of the season while the Browns get one of the rookies ready to go and take over for the rest of the year. I think Joe Flacco serves as an excellent jumping off point for these rookies because he is capable of giving you a half a season of pretty solid quarterback play. But he's also not someone you're going to anticipate giving you 17 games out of because, let's face it, Joe Flacco has not given a football team a full season of starts in this decade. You got to go to the last decade to see when Joe Flacco gave a team 17 starts. It ain't like we just started a decade a year ago. It ain't 2021. We in 2025, y'all. Okay? We halfway through. Joe Flacco has not given you 17 games in this decade. Gotta go to a whole nother era of history to account for the last time Joe Flacco gave somebody 16 starts or a full season's worth of starts, 15, right? It's probably with the Ravens. And it's probably 2016 or 2017, the year before they get Lamar. 2017. That's the last time. It's what it's been. He's not been able to give you 17 games, anybody 17 games in a very long time. But I think he's quite capable of giving you some good starts at the beginning of the season. The big question with this is, okay, once Joe Flacco burns out, who's going to carry the load for the rest of the season? Kenny Pickett, do I have any faith of him playing to the same level that Baker Mayfield played from 2020 to 2021? No, I don't think Kenny's that good. I'll be transparent about that. I don't think that, in my personal opinion, Dylan Gabriel's going to get to that point either. I find it, I would be pleasantly surprised if Dylan did, but I'd be shocked. I think your only real hope to get to that point, talent-wise on this roster, is Shedeur Sanders. I think there's a chance he can get you to that point where you are on par with what Baker was providing in that time period, maybe even exceeding what Baker was providing in that time period, considering that, again, this was not the Baker Mayfield that's a multiple-time Pro Bowler. This was a very different version of Baker Mayfield. I think it's possible with Shedeur, but again, regardless of whether he's a third-round pick, first-round pick, second-round pick, fourth-round pick, or fifth-round pick, he's a rookie. And I'm not going to expect out of a rookie the same amount of production a number one overall pick gave in their third and fourth year in the NFL. Somebody who took their fifth and sixth years to really hit their stride in the NFL. That's how difficult the quarterback position is. It can take time. And Shedeur might be good down the line, but there's no guarantee that means that he's going to be good in year one. So even if you are a Shedeur believer, understand that doesn't guarantee Shedeur going to come out the gates looking amazing. So the Browns' ability to replicate these passing numbers is probably going to be very low. I don't think they're going to be able to do it, right? Maybe for the first month or 6 weeks of the season, we feel like they can do it. Reality going to set in with Joe Flacco sooner than later. Age is going to become a factor. And once that happens, then it's like, okay, well, who can stop the bleeding at the quarterback position? If we have to go all the way to Kenny Pickett to stop the bleeding, we're not going to get to these marks passing-wise. Maybe if one of the rookies are better than what we think a rookie can be at this point or rookie should be at this point, then hey, we'll count that, we'll take that blessing and we'll go forward with it. But you just can't rely on something like that happening. So I think it's very reasonable to be at the place where you don't expect the Browns to replicate these passing numbers. The same thing goes for the running numbers. The Browns were a really good run team. They were 14th in success rate, but they were a top 10 team in run game efficiency, EPA per play. They were 8th in the NFL. Obviously, you're going to miss having Nick Chubb. Whenever you're talking about going back to 2020, 2021, again, you got to answer the question. Well, do you have a quarterback who's as good as Baker Mayfield? And Baker Mayfield wasn't amazing at that point, but he was still a starting caliber quarterback that you can look at and say, hey, he can give us 16 starts. No doubt about it, right? That's not where the Browns are. If you look at the run game, the Browns hope Quincy Junkins can be a top-tier running back. The Browns hope Dylan Sampson can be a big find. The Browns hope that they're finally putting Jerome Ford in a role to be successful because he has shown a lot over the years. But we don't know anything about these running backs. Nick Chubb at that time was a very known commodity. He was a 1,500-yard back, pretty much guaranteed to get you double-digit touchdowns and to be in the top conversation for running back every year. We don't have that. So, yes, the Browns are going to go back to some formulas that they ran in 2020, ran in 2021. But the reason I don't expect the success to be the same as it was in 2020 is simply because the horses are not the same that it was in 2020. Now, there are some things that if they break right for the Cleveland Browns will make this team a lot better than we think, right? Like, I don't want to discount that possibility. You got to factor in the offensive line is not as good, too, as they were in 2020 right now. This is basically an old version of that offensive line, and that matters a ton to what the Browns want to do. So, yes, they want to go back to what they did in 2020. I don't expect them to be as successful because they don't have an all-pro running back. They don't have a starting quarterback right now that you can count on. We're still guessing who's going to be the day one starter. And their offensive line situation, while I think it's been improved this offseason, is nowhere near where they were in 2020, where they were one of the best offensive lines of this decade, right? If you look at the offensive lines in the 2020, that 2020 Browns team still sits higher than a lot of teams. And if you even compare them to the previous decade, the 2010s, I think only the Cowboys surpassed how dominant the Browns offensive line was for that short period of time. The horses on offense just aren't as good as the horses were in 2020, which is why the results on offense won't be the same as they were in 2020. Now, there are some areas in which this Browns team is better than 2020. I think you can make a strong argument that the Browns tight end room is much better than it was in 2020. Right now, I would take this version of David Njoku and Harold Fainin over whatever David Njoku was back in 2020 and Austin Hooper. Wide receiver, the Browns, like as much as people shit on the Browns wide receiver room right now, let's be real. They're better at wide receiver than they were, especially in 2021, but you can even argue in 2020. The names were bigger: Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. But if you look at the production Jerry Jeudy has had for this team, especially compared to the 2021 version of that Browns wide receiver room where no wide receivers cleared over 600 yards, then yeah, man, one Jerry Jeudy, a Cedric Tillman, that's better than whatever the Browns were rolling out there in 2021 production-wise, especially considering the amount of bad quarterback play those guys had to deal with. Like, at least in 2021, they had Baker Mayfield throwing them the ball. Last year, those guys were more productive than that wide receiver room was, with the worst quarterback situation you've ever seen. And more efficient, right? We can't just say it was because of targets. So, yeah, I think the Browns wide receiver room is better than it was in that era right now. I think their ability to develop wide receivers is much better than it was in that era. And I think tight end are better. But the big area of difference between the 2020 Browns and the 2025 Browns is the defense. If that 2020 Browns offense had this Browns defense, that would have been a serious contender to get out the AFC in 2020. Like, the Browns would have probably gotten past Kansas City that year and would have definitely had a chance versus Buffalo in the conference championship game in 2020 if they had this defense. Remember, the 2020 and 2021 Browns defenses were dookie. They were not good. We were doing stuff like playing Andrew Sadejo in significant roles. Our interior defensive line in 2020 was one of the worst I've ever seen. It was awful. 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 I don't even, go back and look at, I think I did a film breakdown, Browns versus Bills. It was the game they played in Detroit. If you ever want to remember how bad the Browns defensive line was, Google that one, because it's as bad as the Washington Commanders game was this year, right? That's the pinnacle of bad offense. Like, I will measure bad offense against that Deshaun Watson tape performance until somebody tops that, unfortunately. And as far as like bad defensive line play goes, I will measure bad defensive line play against that. Like, if you're saying that's the worst you've ever seen, that's what I'm measuring it against, is that 2021 Bills game that got moved to Detroit. Some of the worst defensive line play I've ever seen. Yeah, if that era of the Browns had this defense, they'd be serious contenders, right? And if this Browns team in 2025 had that offense, had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt both producing at their peak levels, or at least close to their peak levels, a legitimate starting quarterback, then yeah, they probably would be, I don't know, in the AFC it's hard, but they would probably be a team that can get out the first round in the AFC at the very least. But that's not where we are. A lot of what the Browns are asking this offense to do is just buy time, right? It's a very different strategy. Whereas in 2020, the Browns offense was trying to score and be very efficient. This year, the Browns are just trying to buy time with the offense. Give the defense a chance to breathe. Let this defense take less snaps. Joe Bitonio mentioned it in an interview where he's like, hey, the defense is much better when they're taking, 50, 60 snaps. We can't let them get up to 72. So this is what they're trying to accomplish. They're basically trying to have an offense out there that isn't going to dominate, but just take some time and get some field goals. They're going to Steeler ball this thing. And I think that could work for this year's Browns team. And that is the right strategy given the personnel on the team to win as many games as possible. We'll see what happens But I do think it's interesting when you make that comparison of the Browns going back to 2020, just looking at how much better some of the horses were to run that offense, why you just can't expect 2020 results in 2025, given the Browns' current situation. But that's my thoughts, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.